So we come back to the specification, and we can say, is the God delusion, as Richard Dawkins is implying in his book of the same name, is it really a delusion? Here's some simple logic. If any religions, well, he's a mathematician, I'm talk about any. If any religions all contradict each other, at least n minus one of them must be wrong. Pope John Paul II subscribed to that because he said that truth cannot contradict truth. You cannot have contradictions about fundamental truths, and that's a fundamental mathematical principle. So if you've got lots of religions, you can say without even studying those religions, if they contradict each other, at least n minus one of them must be wrong. The way, the truth, and the light. Take this apart and look at the way. Well, one way is to say that if there is a God who takes part in divine intervention, then that's a good way of getting things right. If there's a guy up there who's got super knowledge, superpowers, knows everything, and he intervenes in your life, that's a good way of going about it. The other way is do all this science business and work out the way to do things by applying scientific understanding. There are various other ways, which I'll skip over, but they're sort of subsidiary things that some things work. My mother used to say, don't eat pork unless there's an hour in the month, and I used to say, well, that's nonsense. What's got to do with it? Whether there's an hour in the month? And then I realised that May, June, July, with the summer months, and there was no R in the summer months, and the R in the month is correlated with the seasons, and therefore in the days before refrigeration, that was actually good advice. It was the right answer for the wrong reason because of that correlation. But we won't go down that part tonight, we don't have time. The truth. Well, again, if there's somebody who knows everything and they're intervening in your perception of the truth, then that's got to be good. If you can't rely on that, you've got to use the good old scientific method to try and work out what's true. Now, is there another way of knowing beyond those two? I think there is. You can know instinctively. We instinctively, as parents, look after our children. We love our partners and so on. These are instinctive things that we know and that they work. Now, those who believe in the divine dimension might say, well, that's how God created us. But the scientific view is that we evolved because those principles of knowing things without having to learn them, those instinctive responses to situations, have been given to us by evolution, by natural selection, because of their survival and reproductive factors. So morality, nice picture of a Parthenon being done, it doesn't take a gift from heaven. Also, beauty doesn't need a miracle. Science can explain those characteristics of the human condition. And then there's various other things about truth. Now, truth, spelled with a capital T, is a philosophically tricky concept. But we'll come to that in a moment. Let's move on to the light. Text written with divine guidance in sacred scriptures can provide explanations, and understanding by the explanatory power of science can do the same thing. Various other options there. So all this boils down to two choices between a divine concept of the way, the truth, and the light, and the scientific concept. Although the scientific concept of the truth is more about generating models of reality and continually improving those models, rather than being able to deliver something which is absolutely true under all circumstances. Science is an ongoing thing. There's no revelation of absolute truths in science. Let's look quickly at the track record. For the first 1400 years, here's Christianity. It was believed or faced the Inquisition, burned at the stake for heresy and all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't be able to stand up here and talk like this for 10 minutes during those 1400 years. Inquisition would come in and I'd be taken out into the courtyard and burned at the stake. I'm not saying that's necessarily anything to do with religion. It's part of the history of the human race. Crusades against the Muslims, the imposition of our truth by force on other people, and the Dark Ages is unlike by many people as a description of those terms, but there wasn't a lot of light during those 1400 years. How did science do? Well, science was subservient to religious belief. You couldn't do science without taking account of what the religious flavour of the month was. And the flavour of the month during those 1400 years was much the same all the way through. There was no scientific explanation of life to rival creation. Science also was in the Dark Ages. So if you look at, say, transport as a way of getting about, in Roman times, at the year dot, and 1400 years later, you were still going around in horses and carts. They might not actually been quite as good as that, but they were still horses and carts. Then something happened 400 years ago. Galileo came along and invented the scientific method. And over those next 400 years, we improved our chariots enormously. And there's a chariot of the form that science has improved. And of course, that's paralleled in many other areas. We have electric light rather than candles or lamps. We have healthcare. We have food production. We have all sorts of wonderful things which are delivered as the benefit of the scientific age.